Good morning to you. I'm Victor Blackwell in for Carol Costello this morning. Thank you for being with me. Well, after days of tension and some sharp exchanges between the U.S. and Israel, Secretary of State John Kerry will map out the administration's plan for peace in the Middle East this morning. The speech is set to begin in just a couple of hours, and it comes after the U.S. refused to veto a UN resolution condemning Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Well, that touched off days of diplomatic fallout and accusations of backroom dealings. Well, Secretary Kerry is expected to touch on all of that. But with just 3 weeks left in office, will his words have any real lasting effects? CNN Global Affairs correspondent Elise Labott is following this story for us and joins us now from the State Department. Elise, good morning.
Good morning, Victor. Well, Secretary Kerry has been working on the peace process really since he took office 4 years ago. He had that kind of year-long effort to forge a peace deal between Israelis and Palestinians. That obviously didn't work. And ever since then, he's been looking for an opportunity to lay out his vision for how the administration sees a Mideast peace deal. Obviously, this is taken into context of the vote last week at the UN Security Council. And I think what you'll hear from Secretary Kerry in a couple of hours is trying to put that all in context. Why does the U.S. feel that the settlements issue is a huge obstacle to peace, and how they see the possible deal going forward? Officials say everyone knows what the deal is, but that Secretary Kerry will try to put some meat on the bones about that. He'll also announce, what the administration has done so far, but also, I think, answer questions and give a vigorous denial of charges that the United States was orchestrating the whole vote behind the Security Council, as Israel alleges. Take a listen to Deputy Spokesman Mark Toner yesterday at the State Department speaking to this issue.
We reject the notion that the United States was the driving force behind this resolution. That's just not true. The United States did not draft this resolution, nor did it put it forward. It was drafted, initially introduced, as we all know, by Egypt in coordination with the Palestinians and others.
Now, obviously, Secretary Kerry leaving in a few weeks. This administration knows that it will leave office without this issue resolved, without a peace deal. And officials say they know that the chances for a resumption of negotiations or talks are very slim in the near future. But what Secretary Kerry hopes is that he can lay out his vision, how he sees this being resolved, because at some point he hopes that the parties will be ready to get back to the table, and this could form the basis for those talks. Victor.
All right, Elise Labott for us there at the State Department. Elise, thank you so much. And be sure to head to CNN.com. Check out Elise's new piece, John Kerry's Mission to Save Diplomacy. Again, that's at CNN Politics there on our website. Now, for more on Secretary Kerry's speech, I'm joined now by Jason Johnson, politics editor for TheRoot.com, professor also at Morgan State University. David Rohde, CNN Global Affairs analyst and National Security Investigations editor at Reuters. Freda Ghitis, CNN.com contributor and world affairs columnist at World Politics Review. And Ron Elving, Washington desk senior editor and correspondent at NPR. Good morning to all.
Good morning.
Good morning. Freda, I want to start with you. What are you expecting, the meat on the bones that Elise was just talking about? What are you expecting to hear from the Secretary this morning?
Well, I think Kerry is going to do two things. First, he is going to respond to the accusations that the Israeli government has made that it was the United States that orchestrated this vote at the UN Security Council last week. And then the second thing he's going to do is he's going to essentially reveal the plan that he had put on the table about 3 years ago at the end of the talks that he tried to broker between Israelis and Palestinians. And one thing that he will accomplish by doing that is that he will show that the United States is not focusing solely on settlements. And as we have seen, the Obama administration has had a single-minded focus on settlements as the core issue of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. So he will talk about other issues. He will talk about security for Israel, which is a key concern for the Israelis when it comes to a possible deal with Palestinians. He would talk about the issue of refugees, about the issue of Jerusalem, about the possible borders of a state. So all the other about half a dozen issues that are part of this extremely complex conflict that is not limited to the matter of settlements.
Ron, there was an official with the administration who said that the secretary had wanted to deliver this speech some time ago, but it held back. This is the reporting from the New York Times, was held back by the White House as to not anger Prime Minister Netanyahu. What has changed in the recent history that is now not a major concern with abstaining in this vote at the UN Security Council and now giving this speech?
The Israelis are already angry. The Israelis are as angry as they have been with us, possibly in the relationship that goes back nearly 70 years. So right at this particular time, it would seem the least propitious moment you could imagine to put forward an actual plan for resolving the Middle East, for resolving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But already at this point, the fat is in the fire. We're at a point in this relationship where it's reduced to gestures. They're down to the last weeks of the Obama administration. Some of these gestures in recent days have been quite rude, and John Kerry wants to set the record straight from the standpoint of the Obama administration.
So, David, is this, from your perspective, just a gesture? The Obama administration is watching the clock like the rest of us. They know they've got 3 weeks left.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about John Kerry personally. I traveled with him and wrote a long profile of him in the beginning of his tenure as Secretary of State. He passionately believed in a Middle East peace deal. He couldn't do it. Some people said he was delusional. And I think the administration waited. They didn't want to create this issue during the presidential election in the U.S., and I don't think this speech will have much impact. It's sort of Kerry's swan song. He'll try to set the record straight, but the relations are just, at rock bottom between Obama and Netanyahu at this point.
Jason, let's talk about the domestic audience for this, because there are, after the abstaining from that vote in the UN Security Council last week, there were both Republicans and Democrats in Congress who were taken back by that decision. Let me read from you a statement from Democratic House Whip Steny Hoyer, and let's put it up on the screen. Now, it is my understanding that Secretary Kerry, in the last few days of his administration, intends to outline the parameters of an agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. This flies in the face of the United States' long-standing position that such a formulation should be reached only through negotiations by the parties and not by the United States, the United Nations, or any third party. I urge Secretary Kerry and the administration not to set forth a formula which will inevitably disadvantage Israel in any negotiation. So how much of this is about the domestic audience, not just speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Yeah, Victor, you're exactly right. A lot of this is about domestic posturing. It's about dusting off one's legacy before handing this off. Netanyahu knows that all of these negotiations, anything moving forward with the Middle East peace process, is going to be done with President-elect Donald Trump and possibly Tillerson as Secretary of State. So nothing that John Kerry says matters. But for people who are lobbyists and concerned and members of Congress, they want to make sure that, as many people have said, they're setting the record straight. But I also think this. You cannot ignore the fact that the relationship between the Obama administration and Netanyahu has been terrible. Remember, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech in front of a joint session of Congress directly against the suggestion of Barack Obama. So, this is everybody sort of laying out their feelings because they know that things are about to change dramatically once Trump is in office.
So quickly to you, before we go to the next story, do you expect that we will hear a response from the president when he returns to Washington? This is obviously from the Secretary of State, a member of his cabinet, but this animus, some have called it, is from the Prime Minister of Israel, a man at his level. Should we hear from the president?
Yeah, well, I think you're going to hear comments from both. I think President Obama is probably going to back John Kerry. John Kerry didn't write this in a vacuum. I'm sure that President-elect Donald Trump is going to say something, and I'm sure Netanyahu is going to say something. But the reality is this. The United States gives the vast majority of its foreign aid to Israel. There is but so much that Netanyahu can say right now because he's at risk of that funding being cut back once Trump is in office because he has said that he doesn't want to continue paying for the world's problems.
All right, Jason Johnson, David Rohde, Freda, Ghitis, Ron Elving, all of you stay with us. We've got a lot more to talk about in just a moment.